Hi, and welcome to the Child Care Aware of Minnesota Legislative Update for action through Friday, April 19th. This week, we are trying something different with a PowerPoint laying out all of the bills so that you can stop and look at them as needs be. Just reminding you that April 19th was the last day of third deadline, which means that all of the omnibus bills that are finance in nature had to be completed. And you can see on the screen here a list of some of the omnibus bills that contain elements of childcare or early education that I'll be walking through in a few minutes. Again, if you want to grab that screenshot, we will also be putting these up in our bill tracker. But just for sake of orientation, there you go. So first of all, child care access. We had hoped to see a pretty large focus on that this session. A lot of people involved in this bill, as you see here, the Great Start Scholarship Framework. Unfortunately, due to limitations of budget, the funding for that did not make it into either of the House or Senate bills. However, there were some language changes made that will help align future early learning scholarships with some of the changes coming also with child care assistance in the way that those will be allocated. So some progress on policy, but no additional funding this session. On childcare workforce, there were 4 bills or companions of bills that made it into one or another or both of the House and Senate sides. First, the bill that would continue the child care facility revitalization grants did appear in the Senate HHS omnibus bill, and that's funded at $500,000 in one-time funding for fiscal year 25. The bill that would provide more funding to support CDA or Child Development Associate credentials appeared in both the House and the Senate omnibus bills. On the House side, in the Children and Families bill, it's funded at $360,000 currently. On the Senate side, at $500,000, but both are one-time allocations. A bill that would grant additional money to Women Venture for their work with family child care, bringing more women into family child care ownership, was included in the House Workforce Development Omnibus Bill at $1 million in one-time funding. And finally, Senate File 4170, which is $1 million into funding for early childhood mental health consultation for child care providers, was included in the Senate HHS Omnibus Bill, and that's $1 million in one-time funding. Some other childcare related bills. This policy bill related to limiting HOA controlled communities from telling homeowners they could not have a family childcare or trying to put additional conditions on family childcare homes. That it did get sent to the House floor, but has not yet had a final vote. And in the Senate, it was laid over for consideration in the Senate Judiciary Omnibus Bill, but was not included. A bill that would allow family and center child care programs to strengthen their immunization policies did make it into both the House side in the form of the general register, so it's waiting for a House floor vote. And on the Senate side, it is in the Senate HHS omnibus bill. And finally, a new bill that was just heard earlier this week in the Senate Jobs Committee did appear in their omnibus bill, and that is funding for a child care business management solution vendor. It would give funding to the Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, for $1 million in one-time funds to be subcontracted out to a child care business management solution vendor. So that's for shared services work. On the education, specifically on the education side, E12, the Senate E12 bill does include some language that would be this piece of, if you are a school district and are already enrolling children at 33 months, allowing them to be part of your before or after school program. And then the bill that merges the voluntary pre-K and the School Readiness Plus program has made it into, we had a vote on the House floor, and then it was sent to the Senate Education Committee as the House bill, and the Senate Education Committee did include it in its E12 omnibus bill. In higher education, another bill that got heard earlier this week and then was included. This is a bill that would provide funding to the Board of Trustees of the Minnesota State Colleges and University System to partner with the National Head Start Association and the Association of Community Colleges, basically with the focus of bringing more Head Start programs into or onto higher ed campuses. That's a practice that already exists, but would be extending that. It's one-time funding again, $500,000, and it's in both the House and the Senate bill. And finally, agriculture, not one we will always track, but certainly has to do with things like the food program and at the federal level and here at the state. It's been part of funding the farm to school or farm to early childhood programs. So this is additional funding in both bodies. In the House, it's lumped together as early education and schools. In the Senate, there's $100,000 specifically for early childhood education settings, and it does spell out that would include child care centers and family child care homes. So it's a program that's been going for a while. This is about $1.5 million with a $100,000 allocation in the Senate, again for 2025. Finally, we did have an update posted a few weeks ago on what the governor's requests had been. So these are a quick set of updates on those requests and where they landed. The first was to be able to shift more seats or add more seats for the voluntary pre-K program using unspent funds from the reserves. And so that did find its way into the House Children and Families as well as E12 committee omnibus bills and the Senate E12 omnibus bill. The Head Start Association, Head Start Support. This is a proposal to allow our Head Start programs to spend more of their funding on administration. And so it's not any new money, it's a shift in existing money that is allocated. That was included in the House Children and Families bill and the Senate E12 bill. And finally, the Office of Family Child Care Ombudsperson. This was created last session specifically at the Department of Human Services as a liaison between the department and the family child care community. That was included in both the House side at $350,000 for a one-time money, and in the Senate side at $350,000 per year ongoing. Last couple of things the governor had recommended. First was the weighted risk system. This is changing the way that the licensing application works, licensing process works, basically extending and broadening what's currently known as the fix-it ticket. So going a little bit further up the chain, looking at elements that are not as high of a risk to children that could be dealt with through either immediate fixing or technical assistance. Those would then not become elements that are reported on or posted for the public. And that was included in both the House and the Senate HHS bill and the Children and Families bill in the House. Transition to the new Department of Children, Youth and Families. This is, there are many elements to this, but basically all of the enacting legislation and the funding to further implement the new department that starts in July. And that was included in both the House and the Senate side. And finally, the department brought forward its annual Office of Inspector General or licensing bill, and several of the elements are listed here on the screen for you to read. That did move forward in the Senate as part of the HHS bill. In the House, it's split between a couple of elements that are in the House Health bill, and then a standalone bill, which is awaiting a vote on the House floor. What I would call out here, probably as the largest piece, is that last bullet with sub-bullets underneath it, and that is strengthening what is currently on the books in terms of what certified centers, certified license exempt centers are required to do. And there are a few others in there you can certainly read. So looking ahead to the end of the session. Next steps, first of all, the legislature will be out on their final recess of the year from Monday the 22nd through noon on the 24th. When they come back, the bills you just saw listed here will start to make their way to the floor. And once they are voted upon in the House and the Senate, if there are differences between those bills, then they will move to a conference committee approach. The conference committee is equal numbers of House and Senate members who come together, hammer out differences, and come up with a single bill that goes back for a vote at the House and Senate level, and finally on to the governor for signature. May 20th is the last day of the legislative session by constitutional law. So between April 24th and May 20th, all of this needs to happen. And then finally, the end of the fiscal year, meaning our spending year, is June 30th. So again, a lot of what I reported on this in this presentation would be funding for July 1st of 2024 through June 30th of 2025. That's when the biennial budget ends, and the process starts all over again next January. So I will be back next week with an update on whatever we know by then of how the House votes have gone and the Senate votes have gone, and any news on conference committees. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.